In the midst of a brutal snowstorm in the Wyoming mountains, a trembling young Mustang follows behind a female ranger. It doesn't flee. It doesn't fear. In its eyes lies something no one expected, a plea for help. But it isn't seeking rescue. It's asking someone to follow. And where it leads her is a place your heart will never forget. Snow fell like a thick, endless white curtain, obscuring the horizon. Savannah Brooks pulled her scarf higher, her breath turning into wisps of smoke in the biting cold of the Bridger-Teton Mountains in Wyoming. Snow gathered on her hat, seeped into her shoulders, but she kept walking, each step crunching into the frozen ground with the heavy rhythm of her ranger boots. Just another patrol. At least, that's what she thought. Brooks, main station. Report your location. A static voice crackled through the radio amid the howling wind. Savannah raised her gloved hand, pressing the mic closer to her mouth, leaning behind a tall pine trunk. South Pine Ridge. No unusual signs, but the weather's turning. Winds are shifting east. Copy that. Be careful. Forecast says record lows tonight. Understood. She ended the transmission and tucked the radio back into her coat. Tilting her head up, her eyes scanned the white mountain ridges in the distance. No bird song, no wind whispering through the trees like usual. Just a silence so thick, it felt unnatural, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Then she heard it, a sound behind her, barely a sound at all. Not quite a footstep, but enough to raise the hairs on the back of her neck. Savannah turned sharply, hand instinctively moving toward her belt, ranger reflex. Nothing, just snow. But wait, at the forest's edge, beneath a sparse cluster of trees, a small, unsteady shape appeared. A foal. A young Mustang, no larger than a border collie, its dark gray coat caked with frost, struggling to push through the snow. Savannah squinted. Wild horses never wander alone, especially not foals. She took half a step back, watching. The foal froze when it saw her, but instead of bolting like any wild creature would, it simply stood there. Shivering, breathing hard, staring at her with deep, bottomless eyes, not afraid but desperate. "What are you doing out here, little one?" Savannah whispered, voice soft as breath. Of course, it didn't answer, but it let out a faint whinny, so weak she barely caught it, a cry not of threat but plea. Then it turned, took a few staggered steps, then stopped, looked back at her, as if asking, "Will you come?" Savannah didn't move. She'd seen injured animals, orphaned ones, even dying ones. But never eyes like that, eyes not asking to be saved but asking to be trusted. "You want me to follow?" she murmured, not expecting a reply. The foal didn't look back again. It just stood there, waiting. Savannah glanced behind her, toward the ranger station, toward safety, stronger radios, backup. Then she looked at the foal, toward the deep woods, where no human tracks marred the snow. She remembered Cooper, her rescue dog. Years ago, in another snowstorm, Cooper had led her to an overturned car near a ravine. But the radio had failed, and she didn't have enough supplies. One person didn't make it. That night, Cooper had looked at her with eyes just like the foal's. Eyes that said, "We tried." She still owed something. Tightening her grip on the rifle strap, Savannah lowered her gaze. "All right," she whispered, stepping toward the foal. "Show me what you want me to see." The foal shivered, then moved on. Each step took visible effort. It stumbled, but kept going. Every few paces, it turned to check that she was still behind. Savannah followed, stepping into the tiny hoof prints left in the snow. No map, no GPS, but somehow, she knew she was going the right way. The wind picked up, snow swirling violently. She raised her collar, hunched low, eyes fixed on the small figure ahead. Behind her, the forest held its breath. Ahead lay a journey she never thought she'd take. A journey that began, not with words, but with love, with guidance, with hope. And Savannah knew, after tonight, her heart would never be the same. The snow thickened as Savannah moved deeper into the forest. Each step sank her nearly thigh-deep into the blank white earth. Wind sliced across her face, lifting her hood like a sail, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Just ahead, only a few steps away, the foal was still moving, staggering forward, glancing back often, as if afraid to lose her in the whiteout storm. Savannah had never seen anything like it. A wild creature, so young, so frail, yet still determined to lead her. Not to flee, not to find shelter, but to take her somewhere. Somewhere only it knew. Somewhere it needed her to reach, even if it meant collapsing along the way. More than once, the foal, Ash, the name Savannah had just given it, fell. Each time she edged forward, ready to help. But not once did she reach it in time. Ash stood back up, trembling, shaking the snow from its back with a feeble flick of its head, then pressed on. There was something in Savannah that compelled her to trust, to follow. Even as the cold burrowed into her bones, even as sweat turned icy against her skin, and her fingers began to numb. She paused for a moment, leaning against the trunk of an old fir, catching her breath. Glancing around, she realized they were far from any familiar patrol zone. The low shrubs had vanished, replaced by dense evergreens heavy with frost. No footprints, no trails, a wilderness untouched. She tightened her grip on her rifle strap, wondering if she'd gone too far. But then, as if sensing her doubt, Ash stopped ahead, turned its head. Its eyes still held that look, not instinct, but urgency. Savannah nodded slightly and stepped forward without a word. Each time she did that, Ash moved on, and so the two continued, an unlikely pair side by side in silence and snow. By the time the sun dipped low, the world around them blurred into a swirl of white. The sky darkened to a heavy gray, the wind howling like something ancient buried deep within the mountains. Ash stopped beneath a cluster of tall pines. Its small frame shook visibly. It didn't move forward. Savannah pushed through the snow toward it. Is this it? No answer, of course, but the foal's eyes were fixed on a mound of snow ahead, raised unnaturally, like something hidden beneath. Without waiting, Savannah dropped to her knees and began brushing away the hardened snow with her gloves. Slowly, bit by bit, the outline beneath revealed itself. A body, larger than Ash by far, covered in frost, motionless, one hind leg buried deep in a drift. The mother, her coat once a deep brown gray, now muted by frost and ice, her muzzle nearly frozen. Her breathing, if it existed, was imperceptible. Savannah knelt beside her, hand trembling as she pressed her fingers against the mare's neck. Icy cold, but a pulse, faint, fragile. But there, a soft sound came from behind. Ash had nestled against her mother, nuzzling into her mane, searching for warmth, or maybe trying to wake her. Savannah sat frozen for a moment, stunned by the truth of what she was witnessing. Ash hadn't come for help for itself. It came to save its mother. A wild creature, so small, so defenseless, had done what not every human would have the courage to do. She looked at Ash, her throat tightening. In that moment, she wasn't a ranger, not a survivor of countless winters, not the one with the training. She was just a woman witnessing pure, unbreakable love between two fragile souls, and it brought something back to her. Savannah closed her eyes, memory flooding in like a bitter wind. She was 14. Winter in Cody, a car crash. Her mother gone, her father silent. She'd stood in the snow waiting for someone to hold her. No one came. Since that day, she learned. Survival meant walking alone. But now she was the one holding a creature who had walked alone through a storm because it refused to give up on someone it loved. I understand, she whispered, her voice breaking. Savannah stood, looking at the mare, still breathing just barely, and then at Ash. You brought me just in time. She knew there wasn't much of it left. The temperature was dropping fast. The wind had shifted again, bringing with it dry, sweeping snow, sign of a second front closing in. Her hands shaking, she pulled out the radio. Main station, this is Brooks. I've found a mare with severe hypothermia. A foal is alive. Location east of South Pine Ridge, near Canyon Marker 34. A voice crackled through the static, barely audible. Copy that. Send GPS if available. Rescue team will reach you in 20 minutes. Keep the animal warm. 20 minutes. An eternity in this cold. Savannah dropped to her knees, brushed snow from under the mare's back. Ice. No good. She yanked off her outer coat, spread it over the mare's body, then curled beside her, wrapping her arms around the mare's neck. It wasn't ideal, but it was all she had. She'd done the same once for a bear cub that fell into a frozen creek 4 years ago. Risky. But this wasn't the time to second guess. Ash pressed in closer, legs folded, body curled tightly against his mother as if trying to stop her warmth from fading. Hang on, Savannah whispered, as much to herself as to them. The sky darkened further. Wind howled through the trees. And in that frozen silence, 3 beings, a woman, a mother horse, and her foal, lay side by side. 3 beating hearts, clinging to a fragile thread of life. She didn't know if the mare would make it. But she knew this. If Ash could walk a mile through a storm just to find someone to help his mother, then she had no right to give up. Not tonight. Not when there was still a heartbeat. Not when there were eyes that knew how to love. Snow was beginning to crust into ice on Savannah's shoulders. She held Rosa's neck tightly, breathing in short, shallow bursts. The mare's heartbeat, uneven, sluggish, unpredictable, throbbed faintly beneath her fingertips. Each pulse like a weak fist pounding against the edge of death. The wind screamed louder. The sky darkened like a heavy lid, pressing down with silence and weight. Savannah refused to think about the time. 20 minutes, when a life is freezing, could be too long. Ash still lay nestled against his mother. His small body trembled in waves, but he didn't move. His wide black eyes never left Rosa's side, as if watching each breath, willing her to stay alive. Savannah tried to stay calm, but panic was creeping in. She'd witnessed many deaths in the wild, deer wedged between rock crevices, snowy owls fallen from hunger, even humans. But never had she seen a creature fight to survive, not for itself, but for someone else. A foal leading someone through a deadly blizzard to save its mother. She knew she had to do more. Gently, Savannah pulled away from Rosa and ripped open her pack. From the emergency kit, she grabbed a thermal blanket, thin, silver, crinkly, but heat-retaining. She spread it over the mare's body, tucking it around her legs and neck. Then she reached for the thermal flask. Some warm water still inside. She held it to Rosa's lips and tilted. "Come on, girl. Stay with me," she whispered, her voice raw from the cold. Nothing at first. Rosa lay still, her body slack, as though it had already accepted the end. Savannah's throat tightened. Her eyes met Ash's. He stared at her without blinking. "Please," she breathed. "Please don't let it be too late." Then, a twitch. So small, so fleeting, Savannah might have missed it if she hadn't been inches away. A faint, involuntary flick at the corner of Rosa's nose. She brought the water closer. A few drops touched her lips. The mare stirred. Barely. Ash let out a tiny whinny, a breathy, strained sound. He nudged his head against her cheek, like encouragement. Savannah felt something break open inside her. "Just a little more. You've got this," she whispered, rubbing Rosa's neck, trying to coax each heartbeat back toward life. The wind roared through the trees. Savannah pulled her jacket tighter, hunched over Rosa to shield her from the wind's brutal bite. She reached into her pack again, an emergency protein bar. She had never tried feeding one to a horse before. But now wasn't the time to second guess. She snapped off a piece and pressed it to Rosa's mouth. No response. Then, a flicker of her tongue. Slow, instinctive. Part of the bar disappeared into her mouth. Savannah's eyes welled up, not sobs, just silent tears, hot against her frozen cheeks. She didn't know what was keeping Rosa tethered, willpower, warmth, or her foal's faint cries. But the flame was still there. Flickering, fragile, but burning. The radio crackled through the storm. "Brooks, this is rescue team. 10 minutes out. Hold your position. We're approaching from the east." Savannah snatched up the mic. "If you can, speed up. She's breathing, but it's weak. I don't know how long she's got." "Understood. Keep her warm. We're pushing hard." She dropped the radio, turning back to Rosa, still unconscious, but breathing more evenly. Ash hadn't moved. His ears twitched with each of his mother's faint movements. At one point, he leaned his head against her forehead, not crying, just touching. Savannah reached out, her hand gently brushing Ash's neck. He didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned in, pressing his face against her palm. "You're brave, little one," she whispered, as if speaking to the child she once was. "You brought me here. You saved her." The sky dimmed even more. The wind howled like a haunted choir through the trees. But Savannah no longer felt the cold. She was too busy guarding a heartbeat. Then came a rumble, distant but growing. A rescue vehicle. Yellow lights cut through the haze, slicing the storm open. Savannah stood quickly, waving both arms. "Over here, this way." 2 snow-equipped trucks slid to a stop just yards away. Doors flew open. Medics and another ranger jumped out, carrying a stretcher, thermal packs, survival gear. "Jesus, that's a wild Mustang?" one of them exclaimed. "A mare," Savannah said quickly. "Severe hypothermia. The foal found me." "The foal?" The other medic frowned. Savannah pointed to Ash. "He led me more than a mile, through the storm." They said nothing after that, just got to work, calm, fast, professional. Ash panicked when strangers approached Rosa. He reared up, letting out a sharp cry, hooves stomping wildly. Savannah stepped between them. "Ash, it's me. I won't let them hurt her." The foal froze, then slowly backed down, eyes never leaving Rosa. As Rosa was lifted onto the stretcher, Ash followed closely, like a tiny guardian protecting something more sacred than life. Savannah called into her radio as the mare was carried into the makeshift warming tent. Main station, the mare's still breathing, she's receiving care. I think we've got a chance. Copy that. Brooks, you did good. Savannah didn't reply. She just looked at Ash, now sitting by the entrance of the tent, watching his mother like a small spirit guarding the only thing that mattered. The snow had stopped, but darkness draped the forest like a heavy, wet blanket, cold and suffocating. Amber light from the rescue tent flickered across the patchy snow, casting surreal shadows that moved like something out of a dream. Inside the tent, Rosa lay motionless on a thermal pad, her body wrapped in specialized blankets, surrounded by 4 infrared heating packs. Her heartbeat still thudded, slow but steady. She was alive. Ash, the ash-gray foal who had become the soul of this entire night, lay curled beside his mother, his head resting on her neck, his eyes half shut from exhaustion. But he wasn't asleep. Every time Rosa stirred or breathed a little deeper, Ash lifted his head, ears twitching like a watchman standing guard. Savannah sat on a folding chair, her hands wrapped around a hot cup of coffee handed to her by the rescue team. The heat did little to thaw the cold that had rooted deep in her bones, but it was still a luxury. It's been 10 years since I sat out in these woods, a deep voice came from behind her. She turned. Bill Harmon, her former teammate of nearly 7 years at the Northern Ranger post before he left after the sudden death of his wife. She managed a faint smile. When did you come back? 3 months ago. I'm heading the winter response team now. And tonight, I think I remembered why. Bill stepped inside, lightly touching the blanket covering Rosa. She's got a fighting chance. I know, Savannah whispered, eyes still on Ash. Bill followed her gaze, then smiled softly. That little guy's the real hero tonight? Not a hero, she replied, voice hoarse. A guide. He found me. He made me follow, and because of him, she's still here. Bill sat down beside her. They didn't speak for several minutes, just listened to the soft hum of the heater, the occasional rustle of the tarp, and the fragile breaths coming from Rosa. I used to think I understood nature, Bill said, eyes far away. But sometimes, it still brings me to silence. Savannah nodded. Me too. That quiet moment shattered when Ash suddenly rose, letting out a small whinny. Savannah leaned forward. Rosa was opening her eyes, not just a flicker like the night before, but wide, alert, aware. Those dark eyes now glimmering with morning light, alive and present. Savannah held her breath, afraid to blink. Ash seemed to sense it too. He whinnied again, louder this time, and pressed his head into Rosa's mane, nudging her gently. Savannah knelt beside them, brushing a hand across Rosa's cheek. Welcome back, sweetheart. You stayed with us. Rosa exhaled, letting out her first sound since being found, a soft, weak puff of air, but filled with effort. Bill crouched beside them, checking quickly. Reflexes improving, we need to stabilize her vitals for a few more hours before we move. Savannah exhaled deeply. For the first time all night, she allowed herself to feel relief. Ash hadn't left Rosa's side once. Every breath, every stir, tethered them together in an invisible cord of life. Do you remember why you chose this job? Savannah asked, voice low. Bill was quiet. I do, but no one's asked me in a long time. I'm not asking out of nostalgia. I need to remind myself why I'm still here, still waking up at 4 a.m., still walking through blizzards, still going where no paths lead. Bill laid a hand on her shoulder, squeezing gently. There are lives no one remembers but people like us, and sometimes saving just one is enough to carry you through the whole winter. Savannah looked at Ash. He was curled tighter now against Rosa, his eyes finally starting to close. For the first time in my life, I think I've seen loyalty without condition. She said. More than that, Bill replied. That's love, pure, unquestioning, unrelenting. Outside, the wind still whispered. The snow hadn't melted, but inside the tent, amidst soft light and sacred silence, something greater lingered. Faith. Savannah leaned back, resting her head against the tent's support, eyes locked on Rosa and Ash. A part of her had thawed, melted away from the frost-hardened shell she'd carried for years. And in that quiet night, balanced between death, life, and the space in between, she realized she hadn't just saved a horse. She had witnessed a small, brave soul, unshakable and relentless, fighting for the only thing it had in this world. And that had saved her heart. Night wrapped the rescue camp like a dense, breathless cloak, heavy, unmoving, almost suffocating. Inside the heated tent, the soft amber light glowed against Rosa's coat. It couldn't chase all the cold away, but it was enough to keep the flickering thread of life inside her burning. A propane heater pulsed warmth against her chest, surrounded by 4 rotating thermal blankets along her belly and legs. Her heart still beat. Her breath, though shallow, was rhythmic now. Savannah sat on the tent floor, back against the center pole, head low, still clutching a worn woolen scarf now damp with dew and the scent of horse. She'd been in that same position for over 3 hours. No sleep, no food, just waiting. Ash hadn't moved from his place. Curled up beside his mother, legs tucked tight, he would shift now and then, nudging Rosa's side gently. Every time her breath grew stronger, he would let out the faintest whinny, as if whispering, "I'm still here." The tent flap rustled open with a breath of wind. Bill entered, carrying 2 steaming cups. He nodded at Savannah. "Coffee for you? Sweet water for Ash." Savannah accepted the coffee, then placed the other cup near the full. Ash sniffed it, licked the surface slowly, still cautious but not refusing. "Do you think Rosa's going to make it?" Savannah asked, her voice scratchy from the cold. Bill sat beside her, exhaling slowly before answering. "She's been stable for nearly 6 hours. If her lungs stay clear, there's real hope." Savannah didn't reply. She just stared at Rosa, her face unreadable. "I miss my mom," she finally said, a confession slipping out like breath in the snow. Bill didn't speak. He let her continue. "I was 14. Winter and Cody. Mom died in a car crash driving home from a night shift at the hospital. They said she didn't die right away, but no one found her until the next morning." She swallowed hard. "I sat at home, waiting. I was sure she'd walk through that door. When they told us, my dad said nothing. Just packed up all her things and shoved them in the attic." Bill stared at the ground. "Since then, I stopped waiting for people," Savannah went on, voice steady. "I learned to survive, to take care of myself, to be strong, and I've never, not once, let myself hope someone would come back. Until Ash showed up," she nodded. "He never left her. He walked through a storm, led a stranger through the dark, and he waited." Bill exhaled. "He never once believed she'd die, but I've always believed no one comes back." Silence fell again. Ash stirred, letting out a soft whimper. Rosa shifted, her nostrils twitching. Savannah bolted upright. "She's reacting." Bill moved fast, checking the monitor. "Vitals steady, respiratory rate climbing slightly, she's still fighting." Savannah leaned down, pressing her palm to Rosa's forehead. Still cold, but no longer stiff. Ash gently licked his mother's cheek, his dark eyes glowing faintly in the shadows. "Do you see it?" Savannah asked quietly. Bill looked up. "Faith," she whispered. "Not instinct. Real faith. He believes that love alone can keep her alive." Bill nodded. "I saw that once in my wife's eyes before she passed. When the doctor said there was nothing left to try, she held my hand and said, 'I'm not scared. I know you'll keep living.'" Savannah looked at him, eyes glassy. "And I kept going because she believed in me," he said softly. "Not because I thought the pain would end, but because she thought I could carry it." Outside, the wind softened. Snow had stopped. An eerie stillness spread like the entire forest was listening. Savannah pulled a thin blanket from the gear bag, draping it over Rosa. She settled closer, sitting beside Ash, her hand resting on his back. Ash didn't flinch. From his small, worn body, a deep, tired breath rose and fell. "Sleep," she whispered. "I'll stay awake." Bill stood, gesturing he'd keep watch from outside. Savannah nodded, then turned back to the 2 Mustangs. Rosa was still breathing, Ash was still here, and so was she. She thought of her mother, the last time she'd hugged her at the door, the unspoken goodbye in her eyes. She also thought of Cooper, her rescue dog who died from hypothermia during a similar mission. That time she couldn't save him. But this time, she would. The soft light inside the tent dimmed, brushing over her heart. Not blinding, just warm enough so someone wouldn't be afraid anymore. And in the silence of Bridgerton, deep within snow-covered woods and among souls that never give up, a woman, a mare, and a foal shared the quiet miracle only winter could offer, the will to survive. The eastern sky began to change. A pale streak of color crept along the edge of the clouds, like the first strokes of a painter's brush. It wasn't warm. It wasn't bright. But in the frozen landscape of Bridgerton after the longest night, it felt like a promise that the dark had passed. Savannah opened her eyes. She couldn't remember when she had drifted off. Maybe it was after Rosa's heart rate had steadied. Maybe it was when Ash finally curled tightly beside his mother and stopped stirring. Or maybe it was when Bill, without a word, laid another blanket over her and sat guard outside the tent. Whatever the reason, she was awake now, and the first thing she did was look straight toward Rosa. The mare was still there, still lying on the heated mat. But something was different. Savannah leaned in. Her eyes met another gaze. Rosa's eyes were wide open. This time, fully. No longer clouded, no longer dim. Deep black eyes reflecting the soft morning light. Awake, alive. Savannah didn't breathe. She didn't even blink. As if sensing something, Ash sprang to his feet. He let out a soft, high-pitched whinny. So pure, it cut across the quiet woods like a single crystal note breaking the ice. Rosa turned her head. Slowly, her breath deepened. Her ears flicked, her neck stretched forward, testing her muscles after what must have felt like an eternity of stillness. Savannah's tears came instantly. "Welcome back, sweetheart," she whispered, pressing her palm to Rosa's forehead. Her skin was no longer icy. It was cool, damp, alive. Ash let out another whinny, louder this time. He reared up, gently nudging Rosa's neck with his head. Rosa closed her eyes for a moment, then let out a faint puff of breath through her nose. That was all it took. Bill stepped into the tent just then. Heard the whinny from outside. "What's going on?" He stopped cold at the sight. Rosa awake, her head lifted slightly, Ash circling like a colt greeting his long-lost friend. Savannah stood and stepped back so Bill could kneel beside the mare. He checked her vitals quickly, eyes narrowing in concentration. Stable, heart strong, deep breathing. It's a hell of a turnaround. Savannah covered her mouth, trying to keep the sob from escaping. She really made it?" she asked, voice trembling. Bill nodded. "Can't move her far yet, but the worst is behind us. With some rest, warmth, and care, she'll pull through." Savannah looked at Ash. The foal stood close, eyes locked on Rosa, as if his entire world lived in her gaze, and he couldn't look away for even a heartbeat. "You did it," Savannah whispered to him, crouching to his level. Ash turned to her. For the first time since they met, his eyes softened. No panic, no fear, just something else. Something like gratitude. The sun broke through by the time everything was packed. A light-duty transport truck had arrived from the main station to take Rosa and Ash to the Bridgerton Animal Rescue Center. On the ride down, sunlight climbed higher, melting across the snow like fallen glass. Savannah sat in the truck bed beside the small crate where Rosa rested. Ash refused to leave her side, barely an inch between them. She ran her hand along his mane, feeling the warmth returning to his coat. "She's a stubborn one," Bill said from the driver's seat, glancing at them through the mirror. "A wild Mustang letting humans treat her, rest beside her, sleep in peace? That's rare." "She understands," Savannah replied, eyes still on Rosa. "And her baby understands more than we know." Bill chuckled. "Guess we'll need his permission every time we do a checkup now." Savannah laughed softly, her first real laugh in days. At the rescue station, everything had been prepared. A private stall lined with fresh hay, heating units, nutrition, and medical supplies. Rosa was carefully moved into her stall by 3 people. Ash followed step for step. And when Rosa was finally settled on the hay, he curled beside her and didn't move. Savannah sat outside the stall, leaning against the wooden wall, her hands still stained with snow. She watched Rosa breathe slow and steady, her eyes closed. Ash had fallen asleep, his head resting on her belly. The sight made Savannah wish time would stop. Bill handed her a hot cup of coffee, placing it beside her. "So do you finally believe you're meant to stay in this line of work?" he asked gently. Savannah smiled, closing her eyes for a moment. "I believe it. Not just that I should stay, but for the first time, I know I belong here." That afternoon, as the sun lowered, golden light spilled over the rescue station like warm honey. Savannah stepped into the stall one last time before her shift ended. She sat beside Ash. He was awake now, his clear eyes watching her as if he'd been waiting. "I don't know where you'll go from here," she said softly. "Maybe back to the wild. Maybe you'll stay. But I do know one thing." She reached up and gently touched his forehead. He closed his eyes and pressed into her hand. "You're the most beautiful thing this winter gave me." Light danced on his ash-gray coat, making him glow like a flicker of fire, the one thing that never went out during that long, frozen night. That morning, the sky was impossibly clear. Bridgerton glowed under a soft golden sun that poured like honey over the snow-covered landscape. Ice hanging from the pine branches began to melt, dripping in soft rhythms onto the thawing ground. A gentle breeze carried the scent of wet bark and warm straw from the rescue stalls. Savannah stood quietly at the wooden fence. Inside the paddock, Rosa was grazing calmly, every movement measured and serene, as if she had never brushed so close to death. Her strength had returned nearly completely. Her coat, now sleek and clean, shimmered in the sun. Her eyes were bright, her ears flicked at sounds, her hooves stepped with steady ease. Ash stood beside her, tail flicking, legs bouncing slightly as if unable to contain his energy. But his eyes kept drifting to the open gate at the far end of the field, the one that led to the open meadows, to the forest beyond, to home. Bill approached quietly, holding a final set of health check notes. "We can release them today," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Savannah didn't look at him. "I know." She spoke as if only Ash could hear her. "The weather's good. The rest of the Mustang herd was spotted again near the eastern ridge. They'll find their way." She nodded, trying to smile, but something inside her chest tugged gently, a soft ache, deep and familiar. She had prepared herself for this moment, but no preparation was ever truly enough. Bill placed a hand on her shoulder. "Want to be the one to open the gate?" She turned to look at him. "It has to be me." Rosa was led out of the stall with a loose lead rope, though she hardly needed guidance. Her steps were confident. Her ears scanned the open field ahead, sensing the wild calling her back. Ash trotted beside her, letting out a soft whinny, hooves skipping in the melting snow. He looked at Savannah, then at his mother, as if to ask, "Are we really going home?" The entire rescue team stood quietly on either side of the gate. They had watched every moment of Rosa and Ash's recovery, and now they bore witness to their return to freedom. Savannah stepped up to the wooden gate. She unlatched the lock. The gate creaked open. A narrow path of damp earth led to the open meadow, and beyond it, the forest waited. She stepped back. Rosa approached the threshold, head high. Ash let out a short whinny, stepping ahead a few paces before turning back to her, encouraging. Rosa followed, but just a few steps in, Ash paused and turned. He looked at Savannah. Those deep black eyes no longer held panic, no longer held pain, but something else, something that stole the breath from her chest. A thank you. An embrace without touch. A farewell without words. Savannah knelt, placing a hand to her heart and waved gently. "Go, Ash. It's time." He didn't go immediately. He walked toward her, slow and deliberate. Rosa remained still, as if waiting too. Ash touched his forehead to Savannah's, just for a second. But it was enough to break her heart open in the gentlest way possible. Then he turned, running to catch up with Rosa. He didn't look back. Savannah stood, stepping closer to the fence, watching them, two gray shadows disappearing into the woods, lit by morning sun. Every leap, every flick of tail, was a note in a quiet symphony only she could hear. Bill came beside her. "You okay?" Savannah nodded, smiling through the tremble in her chest. "I'm okay," she whispered, "but I know I'll miss them." Bill wrapped an arm gently around her shoulder. "That's the hardest part of what we do. We rescue, then we release. And we carry the memory forever." They stood in silence, eyes fixed on the tree line. A few minutes later, Savannah walked slowly back to the open gate. She crouched, placing her hand on the muddy earth, where a single hoofprint marked the ground. Ash's first step that morning. She closed her eyes, pressing her palm into the mark. This is where her heart had been led back to after years of wandering. Not in an office, not behind paperwork or trail maps, but in a look, a cry in the snowstorm, and a journey against the wind to protect love. She smiled softly, whispering inside her soul, "Thank you, little one, for reminding me of what I forgot. That loyalty and love don't need words. They don't need reason. They're enough to keep us alive." That evening, the rescue station returned to its quiet rhythm. Savannah gathered her things from Rosa's stall. On a small wooden shelf, she left behind a handmade token, a collar braided from old leather and pine wood, for whatever wild soul might need shelter next. As she stepped outside, she looked toward the distant forest. No sign of hooves, no silhouettes. But in her heart, Ash remained. And that was enough. 1 week later, snow fell lightly. Savannah was patrolling near the edge of South Pine Ridge when she heard a sound. Nothing alarming, just a soft rhythm, familiar. She turned. Nothing at first. But then, on the ridge far ahead, a shape appeared. Small, still, its gray tail flicking in the breeze. Ash. He stood there unmoving, watching her. Then he let out a whinny, soft, barely more than a breath. Savannah didn't speak. She placed her hand over her heart. Ash turned and vanished into the trees. She knew he wouldn't come back often. Maybe this was the only time, but it was enough. Because sometimes the smallest beings leave the largest places in our hearts, and some stories don't need a final word, because our hearts will carry them forever. If you believe that even in snow and silence, wild creatures can love and never give up, comment 1 below. If you've ever witnessed a moment where nature seemed to understand us more than we think, drop a 0. And if the story of Savannah, Rosa, and Ash touched something deep inside you, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next journey where life, loyalty, and love are told through the eyes of America's wildest hearts.